The story begins on what seems like an ordinary day inside the Xander family's home. Alice, a widowed mother, is conducting a séance for a man named Mr. Browning, whose wife, Mary, recently passed away. However, Mr. Browning's daughter, Jenny, is highly skeptical of Alice's work and doesn't believe she can communicate with the dead. She keeps giving Alice suspicious looks and even tells her father not to pay the woman a single dollar. Alice lights 3 candles and explains that the Browning family is allowed to ask only 3 questions. Jenny sarcastically asks, "Why exactly 3 questions?" But Alice ignores her and calmly explains the rules of the séance. She says that if the answer is no, Mary's spirit will extinguish one of the candles, and if the answer is yes, the candle will remain lit. Mr. Browning begins asking his questions, and the candles seem to respond exactly as Alice described. Jenny refuses to stay quiet and confronts Alice, demanding to know what's really happening. Before she can finish speaking, the table in front of them suddenly begins moving on its own. Jenny mocks the performance, insisting that Alice is shaking the table with her knee beneath it. But she immediately falls silent when she notices the shadow of a woman moving behind the curtains. With tears filling his eyes, Mr. Browning asks about a recent incident involving Jenny. He explains that she and her boyfriend have been asking him for a large amount of money to invest in a business project. As soon as he finishes asking, the final candle goes out, signaling that he should not give his daughter the money she wants. Jenny completely loses her temper, shouting that Alice is nothing but a fraud. Suddenly, the shadow behind the curtain lunges toward them. All 3 leap from their chairs in terror as the wardrobe begins shaking violently, throwing the entire room into chaos. Once everything settles down, Alice escorts her guests to the front door and apologizes for what happened. When Mr. Browning tries to pay her, she refuses to accept the money. After returning inside, Alice angrily calls for her older daughter, Lena, and scolds her, saying she almost gave Mr. Browning a heart attack. She then opens the top compartment of the wardrobe, revealing a hidden space where her younger daughter, Doris, had been hiding. It turns out Doris was the one making the wardrobe shake during the séance. Alice also reveals the underside of the table and points to Doris's shoe, showing that she had been controlling the candles the entire time. At that moment, it's revealed that every supernatural event during the séance was nothing more than a carefully planned trick. Later that night, as Alice helps Doris get ready for bed, she notices her praying for her late father, Roger. Doris asks her mother why she stopped praying. Alice assures her that she still prays and reminds her that she should always pray to God. Doris then asks why her father never talks to them anymore. Alice gently explains that just because they can't hear him doesn't mean he isn't still with them. Afterward, Alice wishes her older daughter, Lena, good night from outside her bedroom without going in. Because of that, she doesn't realize that Lena sneaks out through her bedroom window to visit her friend Ellie. When Lena arrives at Ellie's house, she happily agrees to have a drink with her friends. Meanwhile, back at home, Alice sadly looks through the stack of overdue bills that she has no way of paying. At Ellie's house, Lena and her friends decide to play with a Ouija board. Before they begin, they carefully read the rules. Rule number 1, never play alone. Rule number 2, never play in a cemetery. Rule number 3, always say goodbye to the spirit before ending the game. They then ask if there is a spirit present in the room. The planchette slowly moves across the board and lands on yes. The second girl, Betty, is instantly frightened, while Lena dismisses the whole thing as a childish game because she doesn't believe in the supernatural. Their friend Mikey takes advantage of the moment and asks whether Lena would agree to go to the school dance with him. Once again, the planchette slides across the board and stops on yes. Their game is suddenly interrupted when Ellie's mother storms into the room, furious. She immediately calls all of their parents and tells them to come pick up their children. A short time later, Alice arrives to take Lena home, clearly disappointed and heartbroken. Lena apologizes right away, but Alice is even more upset after discovering that her daughter had been drinking alcohol. Even so, she understands that life has been difficult for Lena ever since Roger died. She asks her to help with the housework and assist her with the séance business. Lena promises that she'll do her best. Before they head home, she suggests adding the Ouija board to Alice's seances to make them seem more convincing. The next morning, Alice goes out to buy supplies for her seances. While shopping, she remembers Lena's suggestion about the Ouija board and decides to buy one as well. Later that afternoon, Alice witnesses a group of children bullying her daughter, Doris, at school. They mock her by calling her mother a witch and a fraud. Fortunately, Father Tom, the school's priest, steps in just in time, scolds the children, and sends them away. Alice sincerely thanks him, not only for helping Doris but also for the constant support he gives her. Father Tom simply tells her that it's his duty and that there's nothing to thank him for. Back at home, Alice modifies the Ouija board she recently bought. She secretly attaches a magnet to her knee beneath the table so she can move the planchette herself during seances. She then practices using the board, pretending to communicate with a spirit. Meanwhile, Doris is upstairs with her sister, Lena, answering Alice's questions as if she were the spirit. She even claims her name is Marcus, leaving Lena wondering who her little sister is talking to. Before going to bed that night, Alice uses the Ouija board by herself and asks whether her late husband, Roger, is with her. When no answer comes, she walks away feeling heartbroken and disappointed. The moment she leaves, however, the planchette suddenly moves on its own and slides to the word "No." Doris notices what happened and sits down at the board herself. She begins talking to the mysterious spirit, and even looks through the viewing hole in the planchette, as if she's trying to see her new ghostly friend. At the same time, Lena wakes up after feeling someone suddenly pull the blanket off her bed. Assuming Doris is playing another prank on her, she goes back to sleep without noticing the dark figure standing silently in her bedroom doorway. The following day, when Alice goes to pick Doris up from school, Father Tom approaches her to discuss Doris's homework. He asks whether Alice helped her complete it. Embarrassed, Alice admits that she didn't and assumes Doris must be falling behind in school. But Father Tom surprises her by explaining that Doris's assignment was written in flawless cursive handwriting, a style the students in her class haven't even learned yet. Doris insists that her new friend helped her write it, clearly referring to the spirit she contacted the previous night. On the drive home, Lena confirms that she didn't help Doris either. Doris calmly explains that she simply let her friend use her hand to do the writing. When they arrive home, they find a foreclosure notice on the front door, leaving the entire family devastated. While everyone is overwhelmed with worry and hopelessness, Doris pulls out the Ouija board to tell her father about the terrible news. Outside, Lena tells Alice that Doris is still too young to understand how serious their financial situation really is. Moments later, Doris walks outside carrying a bag stuffed with cash. Shocked, Alice and Lena ask where she found the money. Doris leads them into the basement and points to a hidden opening inside one of the walls, explaining that the money belonged to the previous owners of the house. When Alice asks how she knew where to look, Doris simply replies that her father told her. Still skeptical, Alice and Lena sit down with Doris and use the Ouija board to find out whether she's telling the truth. To their amazement, the board answers every question correctly. Doris then tells them that their father no longer needs her in order to communicate with them. She removes both hands from the board to prove that the planchette is moving entirely on its own. Alice and Lena immediately step back in fear. Lena refuses to believe what she's seeing and desperately searches for a logical explanation, convinced Doris is somehow tricking them. Alice, however, becomes completely convinced that everything is real. She says they no longer have to deceive people because they finally have a genuine way to communicate with Roger. Before going to bed that night, Lena looks through the viewing hole in the Ouija planchette and sees someone moving around in the living room, leaving her deeply unsettled. At school, Father Tom speaks with Lena once again. He tells her he's concerned because Doris has missed 4 consecutive days of school without any explanation. Lena explains that her mother has started involving Doris in the family's seance business. As time passes, Doris's abilities become increasingly disturbing. Not only does the planchette move by itself, but spirits also begin speaking directly through her voice. After every seance, she experiences an intense burning pain inside her mouth. Even the painkillers Lena gives her fail to help. Doris tries asking her father why she's in so much pain, but she receives no answer. Determined to find out what's wrong, she stands in front of a mirror while holding the Ouija planchette. Suddenly, she sees a terrifying black spirit gripping her mouth with both hands. Horrified, she screams, and the entity immediately possesses her, entering her body through her mouth. Moments later, she collapses unconscious onto the floor. That same night, Lena has a horrifying nightmare in which her own mouth is completely sewn shut. The next morning, Doris's personality has changed dramatically. She seems distant, emotionless, and constantly stares into empty space as though she can see things no one else can. Later, when the same bullies try to shoot her with a slingshot, Doris calmly stares back at them. Suddenly, the spirit inside her takes control of one of the boys, forcing him to shoot himself instead of hitting her. That evening, Alice meets with Father Tom to discuss her daughters. He warns her that becoming involved with the spirit world is extremely dangerous. However, Alice remains convinced that she's helping grieving families, and she even offers to help Father Tom communicate with his late wife. Meanwhile, back at the house, Lena invites her boyfriend Mikey over and warns Doris not to tell their mother. She explains to Mikey that Alice would be furious if she caught them together. After spending some time together, Mikey prepares to leave, but Doris stops him and says she wants to show him something incredible. She then gives him a horrifyingly detailed description of exactly what it feels like to slowly suffocate to death. When she's finished, she coldly says, "Good night, Romeo," before calmly walking away to watch television as if nothing had happened. Later that night, Lena notices Doris writing continuously on several sheets of paper without ever looking down at the page. Although the sight deeply unsettles her, she chooses to ignore it and heads to her own room. As soon as she enters, she discovers that the mouth of her favorite doll has been sewn shut. Furious, because the doll was a gift from their father Roger, she confronts Doris and accuses her of ruining it. Doris quietly replies that their father was the one who sewed the doll's mouth shut because he wanted the voices to stop. Lena refuses to believe her and continues shouting until Alice rushes in to find out what's happening. Lena desperately tries to convince her mother that something is terribly wrong with Doris, and that all the strange signs point to something evil. But Alice refuses to listen and becomes more upset about Lena yelling at her than about Doris's disturbing behavior. The next morning, Doris completely refuses to go to school. She throws a violent tantrum and insists that she'd rather stay home and talk to her friends, clearly referring to the spirits. Alice asks Lena to gather Doris's belongings from her bedroom. While doing so, Lena discovers the pages Doris had been writing on the night before. The moment she reads them, she becomes alarmed. She immediately takes the papers to Father Tom and asks if he knows anyone who can translate them because they're written in Polish. Father Tom tells her he'll ask one of the school nuns for help. Later that afternoon, Father Tom visits the Xander family home and accepts Alice's offer to help him communicate with his late wife through a séance. He asks a series of very specific questions about his wife, and Doris provides accurate answers through the spirit speaking with her voice. The spirit claiming to be his wife even tells him that he shouldn't hide behind his position as a priest, and that she wants him to find happiness again. After the séance, Father Tom asks to speak privately with Alice. Lena suggests they use her bedroom upstairs. Curious, Doris tries to follow them, but Father Tom firmly insists that she stay downstairs. Upstairs, Father Tom explains his concerns to Alice. He says Doris didn't actually answer his questions correctly. Instead, she was reading his thoughts. For example, when he asked about his wife's middle name, he accidentally thought about his mother's middle name instead. Doris gave the exact name he was thinking of, his mother's, not his wife's. Alice immediately becomes defensive, believing Father Tom is accusing Doris of being a fraud. But Father Tom clarifies that he truly believes Doris is communicating with spirits. His fear is that she isn't speaking to Roger at all, but to evil spirits pretending to be him. At that very moment, the possessed Doris secretly listens to their conversation from downstairs, becoming furious over what she hears. Just then, Mikey unexpectedly arrives at the house. Doris invites him to follow her into the basement once again, promising to show him more hidden treasures inside the walls. Although Mikey is hesitant and frightened at first, he eventually follows her. Doris tells him to look inside the hidden opening where they had previously found the money, expecting to discover jewelry or other valuables. Instead, Mikey makes a horrifying discovery: a mummified doctor's corpse hidden inside the wall. Moments later, Mikey makes an even more horrifying discovery: a human skull hidden inside the wall. As he sits there frozen in shock and terror, Doris tightens her control over him until she completely possesses him as well. Upstairs, Father Tom takes out the papers Lena had given him and discovers they're actually the diary of a man named Marcus, the very same name Doris mentioned earlier. In his journal, Marcus describes how his German family was captured during the invasion of Poland. He also writes about a man known as the Devil's Doctor, infamous for performing horrific and inhumane experiments on his patients. Marcus explains that he was eventually rescued by Allied forces and brought to the United States, but he later ended up confined to a mental hospital. Tragically, the Devil's Doctor was also working at that same hospital under a different identity. The doctor took Marcus from the institution to his own home, the very same house where the Zander family now lives, so he could continue his brutal experiments on Marcus and several other patients in the basement. As Father Tom continues reading Marcus's tragic story, Alice and Lena finally realize the horrifying truth: they have been living in the very house that once belonged to the Devil's Doctor, where those gruesome experiments took place. But the nightmare doesn't end there. Marcus also writes that after his death, he found himself trapped in darkness alongside the other victims whose bodies were buried beneath the house. Even after learning all of this, Alice desperately clings to hope, insisting that Doris must still be communicating with her father, Roger. Lena quickly shatters that belief, explaining that the evil spirits know everything about them because they've been watching and listening to the family ever since they first moved into the house. Terrified, the three of them rush downstairs to confront Doris. Instead, they're met with another horrifying sight. Mikey's lifeless body suddenly falls from the ceiling with a noose tightly wrapped around his neck. Lena completely breaks down in tears at the sight of her friend, but Alice urges her to stay focused because finding Doris is now their top priority. They head into the basement, determined to destroy the Ouija board by burning it inside the old furnace, hoping that doing so will finally end the nightmare. But as they descend, the lights suddenly go out. While searching through the darkness, they discover piles of human bones hidden inside the basement walls. Lena finally understands the horrifying truth: they had unknowingly been using the Ouija board directly above a mass grave containing the Devil's Doctor's victims. As they attempt to throw the Ouija board into the furnace, they hear Doris calling to them through the air vents inside the walls. Father Tom volunteers to go after her himself and tells Alice and Lena to wait outside. He crawls through the narrow, pitch-black ventilation shafts until he reaches the secret room where the horrific experiments once took place. There he finds Doris sitting alone. Father Tom begins reciting prayers, but Doris challenges him. Feeling sympathy for the child, he offers to help free the spirit possessing her. Unfortunately, the evil entity has become completely consumed by darkness and attacks him instead. A few moments later, Father Tom returns to Alice and Lena, but he has become possessed as well. Holding a knife, he chases them through the house. He manages to grab Alice while Lena runs toward the front door, only to discover that it's mysteriously locked and won't open. In one final moment of clarity, the real Father Tom fights back against the spirit controlling him. He tries to save them by trapping himself inside the house, hoping to contain the evil. But Doris, or rather, the entity possessing her, violently shoves him down the staircase, killing him instantly. At the same time, Alice and Lena notice that the Ouija board has somehow returned to the table, as though nothing had ever happened. Seconds later, an invisible force throws Alice backward, while Mikey's hanging corpse suddenly grabs Lena and hurls her down the stairs as well. To make matters even more terrifying, Doris begins crawling across the walls like an insect before racing toward Lena in an attempt to possess her too. Desperate to save her daughter, Alice begs the evil spirit to take her instead. The vengeful entity coldly replies that it intends to take all of them. Doris then delivers a powerful blow that knocks Alice unconscious before dragging her down into the basement. When Alice wakes up, she finds herself chained to an old stone table, the same kind that had been used during the doctor's horrifying experiments. Meanwhile, Roger's spirit rescues the unconscious Lena and gently carries her back to her bed. There, Lena relives the moment when she accused Doris of sewing their doll's mouth shut. This time, however, she sees her father standing behind Doris. She finally realizes that Doris had been telling the truth all along. Roger had sewn the doll's mouth shut in a desperate attempt to silence the evil voices. That realization gives Lena an idea for stopping the spirits once and for all. She returns to the basement carrying a needle and thread. The evil spirit becomes furious, causing Doris to scream in agony, but Lena refuses to stop. Despite the other spirits trying to restrain her, she sews Doris's mouth shut, preventing the spirits from speaking through her. The moment she finishes, Doris's true spirit leaves her body and reunites with Roger. At the same time, Alice finally manages to free herself from her chains and rushes to check on her daughters, only to discover that Doris has died. Lena is overwhelmed with guilt, but she insists that she did what had to be done to stop the horrifying voices. As Lena sits beside her devastated mother, Alice realizes, but far too late, that Lena has now become possessed by the evil spirit as well. Suddenly, under the entity's control, Lena stabs Alice. Moments later, Lena regains consciousness and breaks down in horror after realizing what she's done. Alice doesn't blame her. Instead, she peacefully accepts her fate and joins the spirits of Roger and Doris. Following the tragedy, Lena is committed to a psychiatric hospital. A doctor repeatedly questions her about what happened inside the house, but she remains silent and refuses to cooperate. Even so, the doctor continues urging her to help them because Doris's body has never been found. While staying at the hospital, Lena tears a piece of carpet from the floor, bites her finger until it bleeds, and uses her blood to draw a Ouija board directly onto the floor. She places a pair of eyeglasses between her fingers as a makeshift planchette and begins calling out to Doris's spirit. At that very moment, as the doctor walks down the hallway outside Lena's room, he suddenly senses that something isn't right and pauses outside her door. Completely unaware, Doris's spirit is crawling across the ceiling directly above him, moving silently toward him. Years later, Lena is now an elderly woman, yet she remains confined to the same psychiatric hospital. One day, a young woman visits her and introduces herself as Lena's niece. And that's how the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Don't forget that your opinion matters to us, so be sure to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel.